Given, and it's also
it's never been
putting the squeeze. They make money on
excessive materialism and militarism. We know full well that racism is still that hound of hell.
Cold open.
I love a cold open.
Behind the scenes of what goes on in this podcast. Oh my god, that scared me.
This is the noisiest cold open ever.
Yeah. What were we talking about when we came? Oh, yes. The Celeste
Ng
article.
on the cut, yeah.
Which was just a lot.
Yeah.
A lot of things happening there.
It was, yeah. And I've seen things like that happen. I've never really had that issue on the internet where like Asian men are coming after me and like accusing me personally of things, but it's happened to several of my close friends.
Yeah.
And it's something I'm always aware about, especially with Hapa Mag, but that article was a lot.
Yeah, that happened to me like, it's been a couple years, because after that I was like, oh, I'm never going online to discuss things ever again. That's why like even joining the My Favorite Murder community was like kind of scary for me. I don't know. It's just like scary.
I wrote a whole piece about the My Favorite Murder community, and like the week before we released it, because the whole piece was like how to be a murderino when you're also mixed race, and like a lot of women in those groups don't understand like the racial aspect of crime.
Yeah.
And that we released like a week after the main group blew up, because that one girl wrote a post that was pretty racist, and it got real ugly.
Yeah, I didn't even like follow that group. That was like
I stopped
later.
following.
It was like later I found out that the group was like
it was
dismantled.
bleeding into the other groups I was in.
So scary.
Yeah. But the other groups I'm in are baller. Like My Favorite Murder New York group is the best. I'm obsessed with that
how
group.
We finally met.
Yes, it is.
Yes. Because we met each other like sort of online. And then we like
message.
Yes, and then we were like, okay, we'll definitely meet up sometime, and then we never did. And then we found each other
New York too,
on a Murderino New York group, and we're like, oh my god, you're a Murderino, then we have to meet more.
Being a Murderino is pretty great. I'm not gonna lie.
It's like just a special bond.
It's an open invitation to be a weirdo and be like, let's talk about anxiety and murder.
Yes, which is I feel like I talk about my anxiety and like therapy pretty openly, and people are just like. Are you okay?
No, we should definitely all talk about therapy and anxiety and mental health very openly. Like, we should normalize the crap out of it. I can swear, right? We should normalize the shit out of it, and then we'll all be healthier for it.
Yeah, I'm very much like, I talk about therapy all the time, and people are, at first they're weirded out, but I'm finding that like, the more I talk about it, the more people are like, oh, so like, what happens in therapy? And I'm like, it's great. You just sit there and cry, and it's amazing.
A friend of mine, actually my boyfriend's friend, became a therapist, and he was like, basically imagine that once a week you get to unload all of your thoughts and issues, and then you get to leave, and you just leave it all there. And I was like, because I'm not in therapy yet, I like don't have time or monies, and I need to like work that out, but also I'm 30 and I live in New York, and like I feel like it's really important to do. Can I tell you a funny story though about therapy? So my brother's in therapy, which is very good, and I'm glad, because I think everyone should be in therapy. But I was talking to my mom, and I was like, I think I should go to therapy too. And she was like, why? What do you have to talk about? And I was like, oh, that's right. We're Japanese. We don't believe in therapy.
Yes. Oh my god,
Asians don't believe in therapy at all.
Yeah, it's only recently that my parents have like come around to being like, because when they found out I was going to therapy, they're like, what's happening? What's wrong? And I was like, I'm stressed out. I live in New York.
Yeah. It's a scary time.
Yes.
I need to talk about this. I just like sometimes want to dump things on somebody and then leave and like not think about it. And like, I don't want to do that to my friends. We've all seen that episode of Sex and the City.
I haven't watched Sex and the City.
That's fine. It's that.
A lot of people will say that. They're like, you're not missing out. No. But I'm like, I feel like people make a lot of references, and I'm like, I don't know that.
It was great for the time, and it's still like a good watch, and it is like weirdly a template for female relationships going forward. So like, when you say like, I'm a Miranda, or I'm a this, I'm a that, or like the episode where there's a whole episode where they're like, Carrie, you need to go to therapy, because she keeps taking everything out on her friends, and they're like, stop telling us, you need to talk to somebody else who's not us. And then she winds up banging John Bon Jovi.
Oh wow,
that's that episode.
Oh wow, there's so many things I don't know culturally because of Sex and the City.
But it's also like Yeah, but it's also like not, it's dated. It's very dated now.
Yeah, that's what I've heard too. So I'm like, it's fine.
It's a touch point, but yeah, you don't need it.
I don't need to watch 4 white women, right?
Yes.
I don't need to watch that. I'm okay.
Yes.
Not missing out.
For the time, it was like, there were like no women on TV, so all you could do was watch Sex and the City.
Yeah. Oh, man. But the Celeste Ng article, what was, for you, what was so intense about it? Like, what were your feelings coming out of that article?
I'd have to reread it to exactly remember, but it was a lot of like... honestly, a lot of it was the stuff about people attacking her kid, because I'm mixed and I have a white dad and an Asian mom, and when people say like your kid is gonna hate themselves and blah blah blah, I'm like, first of all, that's terrible. Why would you ever say that? Second of all, that's not true. Like, I work a lot in not just Asian spaces, but in like mixed spaces, or at least I try to work a lot in mixed spaces in order to like remind everyone that being mixed is awesome. Like, I grew up and people were always like, would you rather be white or Asian? And I'm like, the fact that you're asking me that question is so frustrating.
That's awful.
Yeah, and the fact that and like, it's something you can't control. Like, I didn't ask for a white dad or an Asian mom, or like vice versa. And like, no one does. And like, I feel very like happy with the like mix that I am. And I never had it like an issue with being mixed. But for somebody to continually like use that as a weapon is so hurtful.
Yeah.
And like, I mean, you and I have talked a lot like offline about like dating white men and interracial dating, and like, I'm very pro interracial dating because I'm mixed, and like, if it wasn't for interracial dating, I wouldn't be here. Like, Loving Day is one of my favorite days of the year now, and for people to just like say you're a race traitor because you want to date outside your race, like, that's insane. Also, mixed people arguably will be the healthiest people ever, because because we like share genes. Like, that's purebred people, like the royals, that's why they all have health problems. But if you mix it up, you become healthier, and then we live forever. And I'm already Okinawan, so
yes, you're gonna live forever.
Truly forever. Sure. It's actually gonna be crazy.
On top of the Asian don't
reason. Yeah.
Yes. Oh my God. Yeah, that whole thing is so infuriating, because one of the things they use as an example, and this is when I was attacked, because I was also attacked online, and I wasn't even talking about my relationship. What I was talking about was Black Lives Matter at the time.
Right, yeah.
And it was the wrong forum or Facebook group to do this. Because I always came from the belief that, like, oh, we're all going to stick together.
Yes, absolutely.
Which is what we should do.
I'm like a socialist in that way, too. I'm like, as many people as we can band together, like, do it.
Yes. And I don't even remember what it was about. But basically, I was defending Black Lives Matter. I was just like, of course, like, this is something we need to get behind. Yes. And so many Asian men in this group just went to my personal profile picture, took like screenshots of it, and then like shared it widely and was like, she's a race traitor. Yeah, that's what and what was funny was the person that they kept taking pictures of wasn't even my boyfriend. It was like a friend that I was like, here's a picture with. Yeah. And I was just like, this is so funny that they even shared the wrong person. But yeah. And then like this one guy in particular, because I remember I actually thought about putting him on blast. I was just like, I could very easily research where he is, who he is, and get him fired. Turns out he was in medical school in Boston. I mean, I don't remember his name, so I'm kind of putting him on blast now. And I was just like, a part of me was just like, I could take screenshots of these messages and send it to the dean of that school or whatever and ruin his life. But I was like, you know what? No, I'm going to be a bigger person. But if that happens again, I'm going to definitely put them all on blast, because they were using Elliot Rodgers as an example.
And that drives me crazy, and that's so incredibly harmful. And that situation, and like, I mean, on the one hand, like, makes everyone look bad, but also it's like, that is so indicative of so many problems that have to not just to do with race, but also have to do with like male entitlement and all kinds of bullshit. And like that, it's so heartbreaking that becomes like the poster boy
Yeah. For the incel community.
For the incel
too.
community, for violence against women, like. Yeah, for male entitlement to women. Like, and that's one of the biggest things that bothers me is when Asian men are like, oh, they only like white dudes because like white men own Asian women. I'm like, no one owns Asian women.
Yeah.
No one. And that kind of mentality is like, it clearly has less to do with race and more to do with patriarchy, because even like Asian cultures are highly patriotic. I'm not patriotic, highly misogynist. Yeah. And why can't I think of the word? I literally just said patriarchal.
Yes, patriarchal. I was just like, wait, what?
Are highly patriarchal countries. Like Japan is very patriarchal.
For sure.
Like what? I mean, and obviously America is too. Like most of the world is, but like that kind of attitude is, again, like incredibly harmful.
Yeah, it is, and it erases the Hapa community too.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
It's just like, oh, all of these children,
they're not Asian
all
because
have mental disorders, and I'm just like, come on, like
again, we're the healthiest people.
I just can't handle it. I can't handle it.
I know your podcast is, we're not talking about this specifically today, but someone should talk about this at some point where, I don't know if you've talked about Loving Day with anybody.
Not yet.
For people who don't know, Loving Day is, the Loving case is Loving versus the state of Virginia. And it was the case that shot down, laws against interracial marriage.
Oh.
And, actually,
a great one.
Christina mentioned this on the Anime Wong episode where, miscegenation laws.
Oh, yes.
Yes. When she was talking about why Anime Wong couldn't be on screen for, was it not Toll of the Sea, the Pearlless Buck, The Good Earth. Mm-hmm. So part of the case about why there should not be interracial marriage, they said, was because it'll affect the children too much. Mm-hmm. And it's wrong to put children through that. Yeah. And clearly we're fucking fine. So
yeah. And that's a good segue to introduce Melissa Slaughter. She's amazing. So welcome to Now in Color, the podcast that brings those who have been erased in history back to the forefront. I'm your host, as always, Sandie Chang, and today I'm joined by Melissa Slaughter. Melissa has lived in all 4 time zones in the contiguous United States. Is that how you pronounce that word?
I think it's contiguous, but I'm not 100% sure.
Wow, I'm bad at pronouncing. This is like a constant thing when I read people's bios. I'm like, I can't pronounce anything.
I can never pronounce anything on my podcast either.
A former actor in Seattle, Washington, Melissa now resides in New York City as a content creator. She is the producer of the We're Not All Ninjas podcast, which she also hosts with fellow Hapa Mag writer Alex Chester. Melissa also writes for online blogs Nerdophiles and The Nerds of Color. Welcome, Melissa.
Thanks. Yay! And I should note in there, because this is for my Hapa Mag bio, Hapa Mag is specifically a platform for people who are mixed race, which is why I talk about it a lot.
Yeah, so I wanted to talk to you about like how that all started, actually.
Yeah. So that started because Alex, who had been doing the podcast with me for about a year, she was running her own blog called Me So Hapa. And she was like, I don't have time to run this myself, so I'm going to put together a team. And she put together like this whole group of people, and then we just like ran with it. And a year later, we have like, we're working on our 6th issue. We have like a nice growing fan base, like, and we truly like, it's a passion project. Like none of us get paid, but we have a lot of fun, and we've met a lot of really cool people. We've interviewed like some big name celebrities, maybe not big name. I think they're big name.
Didn't you interview Awkwafina?
I interviewed Awkwafina for the podcast, for my podcast, not for Hapa Mag. But I want her for Hapa Mag because she's half Korean, half Chinese. And like inter-Asian mixes are fascinating to me. Mm-hmm. And she like is down with the mixed experience. She said all of her cousins are mixed. So I was like, let's talk. But she's like blowing up and I can't talk to her now.
Yeah, I remember when she just came out with My Vag. The music video, really? And I was just like, oh my gosh, I love this, and I love like
she's great
Asian hip hop, and I was just like, I'm all about it.
I love Safe by Dumbfounded.
Oh, I love
Dumbfounded.
Yeah, I actually went to a Dumbfounded concert last year, and it was so fun. Awkwafina showed up too.
Are you kidding? I missed that concert.
Yeah, the one in Bowery area.
Yep. Yeah. One of my best friend's husband had his birthday party that night. And Alex and I both were like, what if we skip it and go to this concert? But of course we couldn't. Like we wanted to be there for his birthday. But I wanted to see that show so bad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That would be so cool if you interviewed Aquafina for Hapa Mag. Yes. I mean, all we do, I mean, I understand passion projects. This is definitely a passion project too. So what made you transition from being an actor to fully a content creator?
So I got a degree in theater and like was acting in high school, and then was like, I'd say it was like 10 years from like 16 to 26. It's like all I did was theater and performance and singing and dancing. And like, that was it. I lived in Seattle. I got my equity points. Like I was hustling. And then I moved to New York and did it for a year. And like, it spent like a year falling out of love with it. Like I just really hated the grind. I really hated waking up early and going and sitting for 4 hours and not getting seen at the equity building. And then honestly, like one of the biggest things for New York specifically was, and people who don't audition don't know this, but there's like this oppressive sense of desperation when you audition, not from just from you, but from literally everyone around you. If you've ever auditioned in an equity space, because in a lot of the buildings, there's like 4 main buildings where you audition, maybe 5, but they have like these open calls and you show up and you sign up and like hopefully you get a slot early and like maybe you'll get seen before lunch. And in some of the buildings you sit with these kids who are like, some of them are fresh out of high school and they're just like, I just want to move to New York and pursue my dream and audition for this equity tour of whatever, Spring Awakening or Rent or whatever it is. And at a certain point, like I remember sitting in these rooms and I was like feeling a little panicky because like everyone there is just so desperate to get in the room and get seen, have their moment, all this stuff. And I was like, I hate this. I hate this. Because I was in my late 20s by that point. I was 26, 27. And I was like, I don't need this. I don't need this in my life. I've already worked some. Like I already know what I'm worth. And like, I don't need to waste my time this way. And then I just started like not going to auditions or only auditioning in certain places. And frankly, a lot of the things I could have auditioned for, like these big out of town summer seasons, were all shows of white casts. Like they were traditionally all white casts. So
yeah,
it's like, oh, do they really want me to come in for Sister Act and Cinderella or not? So I just like was not feeling it. And then I just like, one of the big moments for me was there was a Midsummer audition and I did not go and I did not prep and I didn't do anything. And Midsummer should be my bread and butter. I'm 5 feet tall. I've played the role before for a Tony Award winning teacher. Mm-hmm. Like I should have gotten a call back, no problem. And I was like, I don't even want to show up. And that's when I was like, I probably don't want to do this anymore in my life. So I stopped auditioning, took like a year and just like to like transition out of that. And in that year I started watching a ton of TV. Yeah. Cause I didn't have to rehearse anymore. I didn't have to audition anymore. Like, and so I was watching just a ridiculous amount of TV and then decided like I should do something with this. And so I wound up writing for Nerdophiles, who I've been writing for 3 years now, 2.5 years, something like that, like a long time. It's got to be at least 2 years. And then from there, I was like, I really like this. And then I got more into podcasting because the commute is so long in New York. You have so much time. And then for the podcast specifically, I was listening to a podcast called Black Men Can't Jump in Hollywood, which is a movie review podcast focused on Black leads. And that's like their tagline or something like that. Yeah. And I was like, I want an Asian version of this.
That's amazing.
Yep. And there wasn't one, so I made one.
Yeah. And I listened to it too.
Thank you.
Yeah. And I was just like, oh my gosh, this is like such a refreshing look. Because like you guys also have like a score at the end, which I found so fascinating.
Oh, yeah. The Abacus.
Yes. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah.
As well?
So the Abacus is a completely arbitrary rating system that I came up with. And I call it the Abacus because it's like literally a numerical thing. And it's based off like the Chinese abacus. Mm-hmm. And it's all movies start with 5 points because again, it's totally arbitrary. And then we add or detract points according to whether or not it has whitewashing or stereotypes or breaks stereotypes or is intersectional. And that is all actually based off of the movies that were coming out at the time, because I had like put together the first season and we which was all like classic movies. So it was like Harold and Kumar, Mulan, Cho Chang. And then we knew what was coming out. And like Great Wall was going to come out. Ghost in the Shell was going to come out. And we were always debating like, do we watch these movies? Do we skip them? And then of course we like had to. So it was like created with the knowledge base of what we had in the past, what was coming out in the future. But since then it's also like evolved a little bit. And so like we'll change some of the rules as we go, or like for Crazy Rich Asians and for a couple movies, we're like, this queer character is kind of the token queer character, but we're not going to take a point because they're not Asian, but we just want to note that like there's a token queer character. So it's really cool to see how it's evolved, even though I made it just like literally riding the A train to work.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that though, because I feel like all movies should have some sort of score like that to be like, to have me not waste my time at movies, basically, because the way I go to movies now is very like a political stance.
Same.
I'm just like, if there is not a single semblance of representation,
I'm not going.
I'll just see it on Netflix, because I'm just like, how many more like white man crises movies can I watch?
God.
I'm just like, I don't care anymore.
That was literally like when I saw the poster for The Big Short, like a couple years ago, I was like, I don't care. And then I watched it and it's a really good movie, but I'm glad I waited till it was on Netflix.
Yeah.
Like it doesn't need my money.
Exactly. I'm just like, it's fine.
That being said, I'm still going to see A Star is Born.
Yes, we all have problematic faves.
Yes.
It's okay.
Yes.
I was talking to you during Resistance Cranes. I was just like, what saved me in 2018 was Jersey Shore coming back. I was just like,
I love how much you love Jersey Shore.
I love the Jersey Shore. Like, literally before you came this morning, I was just watching like old episodes of Jersey Shore, and I'm just like, man, they were so crazy back then.
Oh my God. Did you watch Family Vacation?
Yes, I love Family Vacation. I live for it. Like, part 2, I'm just like, wow, it's so good.
God.
It like makes me, I don't know, it makes me so unbelievably happy. It's just like everything else is just like shut down.
Good.
Yeah.
Follow through with that. Mine is Great British Bake Off. So
Yes.
like,
love it.
yes.
Yeah, and I don't think, I think it's okay. We talked about consuming just like problematic media, because like if we don't, then we would not consume any media, because
Truly.
it's all problematic.
There was a time in like my last year in Seattle, I was like, I'm not going to see casts of all white people anymore. And my theater going dropped dramatically.
Yeah.
Because like there's only so much then you could see in Seattle, especially. Like here it's a lot easier because New York is so diverse. And like film, it's a lot easier because there is so much all the time.
Yeah.
But yeah, you really shift how you watch things and what you watch. And like there's just like some movies that everyone will see that you're like not gonna engage in that.
I still haven't like figured out what the words should be, like, who are we bringing to life, or who are we bringing
I know you
to
need
the
like a
room?
segment intro.
Yeah, but I'm not sure. I'm just like, what topic are you bringing in today?
So I'm bringing in this, it's not even a story. Yeah, it's the topic of Japanese Zoot Suiters during Japanese internment. This actually goes back to my acting a little bit, because even though I don't act anymore, I still do a performance about Japanese internment at different schools in the tri-states. And so because of that, I like actively had to learn a lot about internment that I didn't know previously, because I was that kid that was like, I don't want to know. Yeah. I knew very little about it. I never talked to my family about it. I mean, you also can't. Now that I do know things, I still can't talk to them about it because that trauma is fucking real.
It is.
Yes.
And it was only in high school that I learned about Japanese internments, and we did a whole project. We did a whole history project on it because
really?
Yeah.
That's good, actually.
Because it was like I don't know what it's called. I like remember we went on to nationals. It was like a history competition where we like form groups and like we present a history project. And at the time, websites were just becoming a thing. So we like did a website about the Japanese internments, and we had videos. So like we actually found one of the photographers, he like snuck in a camera, or he created a camera while he was an intern there. And he like took pictures of what the intern, and we found him. And we interviewed him and like had a video of that, and that was like the cool thing at the time in the early 2000s. And I remember even at the time I was just like only like 17, 16. I was just like, I can see that he's not, how can he be fully healed from this? Like at the time he was maybe in his teens.
Mm-hmm. The most my family ever talked about it to me was when my grandfather was like, you need to read Farewell to Manzanar. Mm-hmm. Like that was it.
Oh, I haven't read that.
It's I want to say it's actually a true story, but it was like in the young adult section, and it was about a girl going through internment, and like that's the most my family ever talked to me about it. I heard everything third person from my mother, and then I just met up with my cousin a couple months ago, and I've only met her like twice ever before this, and she was like, okay, so this is the other thing you don't know in the family, blah 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 blah. But like I've never sat down with them. My grandmother is 93. She's Okinawan, and she wasn't there during the Battle of Okinawa, which is this big battle where the U.S. invaded the island of Okinawa at the bottom of Japan. Everyone who's seen Karate Kid knows what I'm talking about. I've never seen it, but people talk to me about it like I should know. Anyway, but I know Okinawa. But I've like never asked her about it, and I'm afraid that if I do, she'll break in half.
Yeah. So this is like a huge topic in my podcast is intergenerational trauma.
I know.
My grandmother definitely has some for her PTSD, and it's been with her entire life. And that's the thing with like Asians not being great on mental health. I'm just like, she should have just been in therapy forever, basically, because like she has a long history of alcoholism and just kind of this unstable behavior that has always scared me. And then like my parents are just like, it's fine, she's your grandma. And like it's only now where they're just like, oh, she definitely should have just gone to therapy, probably. Because the only times where I felt like she was a genuine human was when she talked about the war. And she would just like tell these stories, and she would just like burst into tears and talk about like Japanese soldiers coming in and like
the Japanese fucked up everything,
and like just these intense like violence that she would tell me. I'd be like, what the, and you know, I'd be a kid and I'd be like, what the fuck, like this is crazy, like is this real? And now looking back as an adult, I'm like, yeah, those were the only times she was like a real person to me, was when she's like retelling like what the Japanese did, and then later in communist China and like all the things she had to see there when she fled. So I'm just like, yeah, trauma is very real, and like it is a scary topic to bring up, because when you're that old, that's like, I don't want that to be the last thing you talk about too.
Right. And like my grandfather got sick when I was young, so like he's been dead for like years now, and so there's just, but his family's huge, and so I want to go to Hawaii and sit with my Auntie June and be like, okay, Auntie June, like, what the fuck? But she was 3 when it happened. So, like, she has no recollections. And, like, there's this, when I was a kid, we didn't learn much about internment. And then I learned very little from my family. And then I didn't want to know anything about the Pacific World War. So I actually didn't know almost any of this until I moved to Seattle and had to learn about it for a play. And Hotel on the Corner of Bitter and Sweet by Jamie Ford. Everyone should read the book. Jamie's great. But and then I had to learn it for this piece that I still do, and I've been doing it for 4 years now. But I'll probably never talk to my family about it, just because like you can't, like, I don't know how I'm not close enough with some of them. My grandmother doesn't speak English. I'm very, very sure that my mom, who will probably listen to this episode, she's not going to want to talk about it either. And I love my mother, and she's very open and like wonderful and all of these things. But that is like a thing that we're like, we don't talk about much, and we don't talk about how it affects us. And like, when I do talk about it, she's like, does it really, like, this didn't happen to you? And I'm like, let's talk about intergenerational trauma. And she's like, well, I don't want to.
Yeah, intergenerational trauma. It's a thing. It's
absolutely
scary.
a thing. But like my family doesn't, her side doesn't really have a history of like mental illness or anything like that that's trackable. My dad's side definitely does. So my mom's even like, I don't know how that's passed down. And I'm like, I know that there are like weird trust issues that I have, and like weird fears that I have that are probably directly related to that trauma.
Yes. Yeah. I definitely think about a lot of like my anxiety. I'm like, where did this come from? Like, Also, I hate 80s pop for some reason, and I'm like, I swear to God, in a previous life, I was murdered to 80s pop.
I'm convinced I'm going to die in a car crash. I'm convinced in a past life I died in a car crash. I have a crazy story to tell you, actually.
Oh my gosh.
This is a total sidebar. This is like a my favorite murder story. I actually sent this into them, and they haven't read it for a mini-sode. And this does tie into intergenerational trauma. So a friend of mine, she has been working with this healer who does your aura and all this stuff. And like this friend has like Lyme and a lot of other issues that to work out, including intergenerational trauma. We talk about it often. And so she now, like a group of us started talking to this one woman, and I only did one session with her.
Oh my gosh, I'm so interested already.
Right? And I was like, okay, I have this thing with my neck where I always have to have my hand on my neck. I don't know why. But when I sleep or like sometimes on the subway or like I can't have my hair on it, like I'm very careful about my neck. It's a very sensitive area for me. And when I get sick, the first thing that goes is my voice always. And I was like, my throat chakra is like incredibly sensitive, all of that stuff. So she's like, okay, I'm looking into your past lives. And she goes, okay, so like 10 generations ago, whatever it is, 10 pet lives ago, you were hung because you were so beautiful that the men couldn't handle you and they thought you were a witch. And so they hung you. And I was like, I don't even care if this is real. Like, I want this. This is amazing. So yeah, she was like, you were murdered in a past life.
Oh my gosh, I need to verify my 80s hate.
Yeah. Talk to this woman. She's amazing. Again, I haven't gone back to her because I'm a little worried. Like, she's a witch. She's straight up is, I think, a witch. Like, in the best way, in like that aura healing, like dimensional way. A lot of my friends go to her for a lot of things. Mm-hmm. But when they come back and they're like, Karen did this, she did that, it was amazing, blah, 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 she knew this. I'm like, that's too much and I can't handle that. And she's a witch.
But yeah, intergenerational trauma. It's real.
Yes, it is real. And some of it will play into this story. So
and now
we're going to transition to, So part of the reason I wanted to do this story first, because there's like a couple of topics that I invited myself to talk about.
I love that you invited these topics because a lot of people are like, history, I hate it. No, I don't know.
Oh my God. I love history. And because I have like a movie review podcast, these are the things that I was like, I want to talk about. These are the things where I'm like, why aren't they a movie?
Yes.
And so this is a part of it. All of my information comes from one article from Nikkei Chicago from 2014. There's no other record of like this anywhere. Like this one woman wrote this like two website page article. It's great. But I should probably start at the beginning with what the hell is internment?
Yes. What is it?
I keep forgetting. Yeah, people don't know. So, how do I want to start this? I wrote all this down. Okay. So let's start like a little before with immigration. Japanese people started coming to the U.S. in the early 1900s, and like they were only allowed to live in certain areas. They weren't allowed to become citizens. Early model minority shit, though, like the agreement with the U.S., because this is during the Chinese Exclusion Act, is that they could only bring over like educated people, college educated, like wealthy landowners, all that stuff. So like they were only bringing over their model minority folks anyway. Mm-hmm. And then they were settling, and like over the decades, they all started to own like businesses and were thriving. My family ironically owned a laundromat. You owned right? Yeah. But they were also like farmers. Like Japanese people were crazy good farmers too. Mm-hmm. And then, so they were like doing pretty darn well for themselves leading up to the war. And then of course Pearl Harbor happens, and then 9066, the executive order signed by FDR to put everyone into camps gets signed. And that was signed in, I want to say, February of 1942. Yes. So then everyone gets shipped off to camps.
Yes.
It's 42 to 45 are the camps. There is a language thing where people now call them internment camps, but there's a movement to start calling them incarceration camps because they were basically prisoner of war camps.
I accidentally, in air quotes, when I was doing this history project, I have this memory of me saying, oh, the Japanese concentration camps.
That's also a good term for it, though.
And then my teacher was furious at me, and she was a white lady. She was just like, they're not concentration camps, they were internment camps. And I was like, what's the difference?
People have called them both. Yeah, because they're a concentrated group of people. Internment also implies like a specific period of time. Like you're only going to be here for this long. It's an internship. You're only here for 6 months or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And in fact, when people went to these camps, they had no idea how long they would be gone. They didn't know where they were going. They were told to pack what you could carry. So most people had 2 bags. And they didn't know were they supposed to pack coats or dresses or swimsuits or silverware or like heirlooms. Were basically people prior to internment like destroyed all of their heirlooms and photos from Japan, because anything that was associated with being from Japan could be confiscated by the FBI. And if FBI were just like raiding people's houses willy-nilly, and like it was really scary. And of course, because people were all concentrated in the same spot, it was really easy to just like decimate a neighborhood basically. And so that's why there's like not really Japan towns the way there are Chinatowns or like historically African-American neighborhoods, is because people were shipped out. Fun theory also is that part of this happened because of the farming. In California, the Japanese farmers unions were so strong that the white farmers were like, we want their land, so kick them out.
Oh my God, white people.
Yeah, same thing happened in Seattle. I mean, yeah, the white supremacy was real.
White supremacy ruining everything.
Truly, that is what happened.
Sad.
So that's what internment is. Yes, they all got shipped off to 10 different camps throughout the U.S. and they were like the shittiest, most barren regions of the country. Like, and even now, I think there's one that still stands. I think Manzanar still stands. And then there's like a couple of locations where there's like a marker or a building and you can do a pilgrimage, but you really have to go and like hunt them down because they're in the middle of nowhere. So
Wow.
That's internment. It's really terrible. There's a lot more that goes with it, but that's like the quick and dirty of internment.
Yeah.
I'm missing a million things. I know. If anyone gets mad, trust me, we know. So Zoot Suiters.
Yes.
This is the musical I want. I want like a big Broadway musical about this, and I'm mad that Allegiance didn't feature this.
Is that the same? Is it the same as like that song Zoot Suit Riot?
Yes.
Because I've heard that song.
Yes. Everyone knows the song. Yeah. So Zoot Suiters came from the Latinx. I mean, obviously they weren't Latinx at the time, but like the Latinx community in LA. Mm-hmm. And it had bled into like the African American community, and it had bled into the Asian community because I was reading up on the Zoot Suit riots, and they were arresting Filipino Zoot Suiters too. So call back to your podcast about Asians in hip hop.
Oh,
We've always been there. We've always been there.
That is featured in Rich 2's episode about Pedro Flores, where we talk about him for 10 minutes. Yes.
I loved your conversation on hip hop. But yeah, we've always been there. So Japanese started picking up the Zoot Suit from the Hispanic community in LA because, again, they're all segregated away from the white neighborhood so they could all hang out with each other. And this is like when people actually would hang out with each other. So Zoot Suiters were these like, I don't want to say gangbangers, but there were like Zoot Suit, like Pachucos was what they were called. And there were like Pachuco gangs. Yeah, and they would like...
So cute. I was just like, what?
I know, in my mind, I'm like, oh, it's so cute because they're like drinking and driving fast cars and breaking the law and like gambling and playing poker and chasing girls. And then I was like, oh, they're just fuck boys. They're just fuck boys.
There's something with me, and I'm like automatically like, oh, cute. But I'm just like, oh, fuck boy.
I know, same. I was like, I love this. They're rebellious and like, but there's another fuck boys.
Still haven't grown out of that.
But I mean, again, listening to jazz and swing and like staying out late. And it's always like, it was like the youth culture, and they wore zoot suits or they called them drapes. Mm-hmm. And the funny thing about drapes is during World War II, and this is part of the Zoot Suit riots as well as something that happened in internment camps, is drapes had excessive fabric. Mm-hmm. And during the war, you wanted to save all your fabric. That's why like 1930s clothes go from like super poofy, and 1950s clothes are super poofy, and 1940s clothes are all really slim because all that poofy fabric went to like making parachutes and like head wound dressings for the war and things like that, or like uniforms or whatever. And so a way to protest was to wear these like huge baggy suits that had extra fabric that could have been used for the war effort. And so for internment camps, there were kids who came from LA, got shipped off to camps, and started like pachuco gangs in the camps. And they called them pachuke or yogore. Yogore is a derivative of a Japanese word that means to get dirty. I know, which is when I was like, fuck boys.
I'm just like, oh my God, where are the hot Asian men for these leading roles?
That's why I'm like, okay, so like, I know he's not Japanese, but like, I would love a Chris Pang featured episode. Like, yes.
Isn't there that like half Japanese, half, no, God, I don't remember. Is it Henry? No.
Henry is half Malay.
Malay. No, not Henry Golding. Something Godfrey Gao. No.
Godfrey Gao's beautiful. Godfrey Gao's full East Asian. I can't remember if he's Chinese, Hong Kong, or Taiwanese, but he's full East Asian.
I swear there's like
I was gonna look up like who are some Japanese men who should be in this, but weirdly there's like not a lot of Japanese actors. I know a ton of Korean actors and like Korean American actors, but
I don't know a lot of Japanese American actors now that I think about it.
Takeshi Kaneshiro is beautiful.
Takeshi Kaneshiro, that's who I was thinking of. I was I knew there was like a
Takeshi Kaneshiro is like but he's half
Taiwanese.
Yes.
That's how I know. I was just like, yes.
House of Flying Daggers. Yes. Beautiful. Yes.
He's a beautiful, gorgeous man.
Yes.
Yeah.
He is, yeah.
See, he could be a Zoot Suiter.
Yes, no, he absolutely could. And then like, in my mind, I was like, okay, so Sonoya Mizono, who's half Japanese, or like, you could get, I mean, and I know it's like there's a lot of conversations on my podcast about like, should you cast ethnically correct, quote unquote, or like, should you just let it slide? And this is one of those, I'm like, get as many Asian people as you fucking want and like dress them up, put some drapes on, play some jazz, like.
Oh, I would love that.
Right? When they were like running around the camps. So so this is where we get into like more model minority stuff. Because like model minorities are very early for the Japanese. Also, Japanese like think they're the best and they're amazing. And like,
I feel like every Asian, like.
They're the most nationalistic, xenophobic ever.
Like, because, like, even Chinese people are just like, we are the best. And then Koreans are just like, no, we're the best. And it's just like this whole thing. Sorry, I'm, like, having a day where my tea is spilling, my microphone is falling. But, yeah.
Yeah, they do.
Everyone
well, because the crazy thing, though, is, like, okay, so I make a lot of jokes. Not a lot of jokes. This is terrible. But I think it's funny because it's historical. I'm half, my dad's side is, like, British. Like 3 centuries ago, and my mom's side is Japanese. The Japanese were basically the imperialist colonialist of Asia. So like I'm the ultimate colonialist, and at some point I owned all of the land.
Yes.
All of the land in the world was mine.
Have you do you follow the comedian Eddie Izzard? Eddie
Izzard?
Yeah.
I love Eddie Izzard.
He has this hilarious joke where he's just like, now when there's conflict, you should just hire the Japanese and the Germans because they know how to control shit and they'll just be like, there's tight conflict, we got this, like, we'll figure this out.
We're gonna reorganize it and all of you are gonna get in line.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, that's so true. The Germans and the Japanese.
Truly though. Yeah. That sounds accurate. Yeah. Anyway, so but with that, there is this like law and order aspect of like, and communal aspect of the Japanese culture. And some of that played into, well, first of all, that's very Japanese, and it was already conflicting with Americans, like, because that like communal aspect directly conflicts with the individual growing up of an American mindset, American perspective. And so there is like this whole communal thing in the Japanese cultures of like people whose families have been here a long time. That's all based around internment, and it's based around like when the first generation fought with the second generation who's born here about whether or not they're American or Japanese. And like all cultures kind of have this, it's all immigrant cultures, but it's really tight, like tightly labeled and like in the Japanese culture because of internment. Yeah. Because a lot of like Issei Nisei is the first and second generation went through internment. So like my grandfather was in Nisei and his family was in Hawaii, so it was like a whole other thing. But like that's the generation that went through internment. And then like Sangsei, Yongsei generations, I'm Yongsei, they're more American. And it's like, it's a crazy thing. So like these Issei Issei Japanese were like, we have to follow the rules. We have to show that we're obedient. We can't riot. Because like when I teach this, a lot of kids are like, why didn't any of them try to escape? Why didn't any of them fight back? And I'm like, that's a very American ideal. Like, of course, that's what we would do. We're American. We founded a country upon fighting back. Like, that's what we do. But Japanese are very law and order obedient, like whatever is best for the community. And what's best for the community is to prove that we're good Americans, and then they'll let us out, which that was the idea. So much so that the JACL had like put out notices, like the government was working with the Japanese-American Citizens Leagues to be like, calm your people down and like tell them that they need to follow orders, and then whatever.
For listeners who don't know, what is the JACL?
JCEL, the Japanese-American Citizens League, is it's like the NAACP of Japanese people in America.
Yeah. So what did the Zoot Suiters do in the internment camps?
So they would like, same thing they did out in LA, where they would like stay out late, break the rules, quote unquote, like dance, chase girls, like basically the same things. Like, and they would riot like in the camps, but they wouldn't riot with the soldiers. They would like fight with other Japanese who were like, you need to calm down. And they were like, no, this is bullshit. Yeah. And they would fight within their own camps in their own communities. And then eventually, after the war, they were all like kind of, okay, so this is a big thing about internment, is that the quote unquote goal of internment was to have the Japanese learn to assimilate to Western culture and to assimilate into American culture, right? Which is so gross.
Bad.
Right.
I'm shaking my head for those who can't see me.
And so they would like, a lot of these Zoot Suiters got shipped out to like Chicago, and they were like young men, and they're like, okay, you're going to go work here now. And they were told like, and this is all from the Nikkei article, you can't congregate with other Japanese. You can't use Japanese to speak, which is another intergenerational trauma thing where like, I don't know Japanese. A lot of people of my Yonsei generation don't know Japanese. And I have found it to be fairly, I don't know if traumatic is the word, but is like the disconnect is really big for me. And so they weren't allowed to do that. And then they all like went out to Chicago and joined Pachuco gangs.
Interesting.
But this aspect of assimilation was like, they chose to go and assimilate more with the side of otherness, quote unquote, with the like Latinx community, instead of assimilate into the larger white majority community, even though that was the goal, which is, I think, frankly, ridiculous. Yeah. So my like dream movie is there's like, it's like a Grease situation where like a Pachuco from LA like meets a young girl from Wyoming, and they're at Heart Mountain and they fall in love.
I love this.
Right?
You should write this movie.
I don't write fiction. I write a lot of nonfiction and essays and articles. I don't write nonfiction. Okay, or I don't write fiction.
I'll maybe write it.
Yes, please. Yeah. And then like it will feature all the fun music, and they can like, it's like a wrong side of the tracks type of thing. And it's
so adorable.
Yes,
I love it. Why isn't there a movie about this?
I don't know. Well, I mean, there's not an internment movie anywhere. Like,
oh right, wait, wasn't there one? No.
There's Snow Falling on Cedars.
Yes, that one. I was just like, something about snow.
Yes, there's Snow Falling on Cedars, which I've never seen or read.
I've never seen or read that either.
I think it's written by a white dude. I might be wrong. Cut that out if I'm wrong.
The one book I have with me, actually, when you were talking about people just packing up and leaving and destroying all their heirlooms and everything, it's called When the Emperor Was Defined. Actually,
yes, I know this book.
In the corner. I read it a long time ago, too. Yes, this one.
Have I read this one? I have read this one. I stole this out of a free bookstore in my neighborhood.
Yeah, and there's a section in it that I like could not forget where the mother, as she's packing up to leave, she kills the family dog.
Yes.
And I was like, no, not the dog.
So the thing with that is like, you weren't allowed to take pets, and people would leave. I mean, they would like sometimes leave goods or pets or whatever with friends who obviously weren't Japanese, because all the Japanese on the West Coast were being shipped off. But I mean, if you didn't have those connections, then like their dog in the story would have just run in the streets and starved to death anyway. Yeah.
To your knowledge, were there any protests against the internments? Like anything, like we were talking about earlier about like how you would rise up and like, were there anything of that nature at all, because there is that like difference in generation where people are like, this is bullshit.
Yeah. Not to my knowledge.
Yeah.
There wasn't. There were Quakers who were going to camps because they were pacifists.
Yeah.
And they were bringing goods. And when the people were released from camps, they would provide shelter and homes and like employment and things like that. But Quakers were far and few between. There were, his name is Governor Carr in Colorado, who offered amnesty basically to anyone who wanted to move to Colorado, because the thing about internment was it only happened to people who were at a very specific mileage on the West Coast. So there were Japanese like in the rest of the country, and there were Japanese in New York and in New Jersey, and none of them were shipped off. I keep saying shipped off. That's like not the correct term, but yeah, most of the Japanese were all relegated to this one portion of the West, like the furthest West Coast. So a lot of people didn't go to Colorado because like a lot of these people didn't have the money.
Yeah.
Frankly, like what were you going to do? Also, they didn't know what if they got out there, if they were going to actually be safe, because like who knew? And you can look it up on the internet. And then this doesn't need to be a whole thing for your podcast because this actually isn't history books, but there were these 3 lawsuits that were filed. The most famous one is by this man named Fred Korematsu. I'm going to do a little bit about the Korematsu thing, but I'm going to get emotional when I talk about it. So Korematsu versus the United States and Hirabayashi versus the United States fought this curfew that was put into place. Basically, the U.S. was like, if you are of Japanese descent, you need to be in your homes from 8 p.m. to 6 a.m. and you are not, no, reverse that, 6 p.m. to 8 a.m. and you're not allowed out. Is that it? I can't remember. I always flipped the two.
Yeah.
But there was a curfew, which was like, if it's racial profiling, it's like, I mean, a lot of the things that happen in my mind, I don't know this for sure, but it sounds like the template for the Patriot Act, which basically did away with due process in the early 2000s after 9/11. And so they sued and they were like, we're American citizens, we have inalienable rights, and you're not allowed to tell us things like when we're allowed to come home, because that's against the Bill of Rights. And they lost their cases.
Wow.
And the Korematsu case is like constantly studied apparently in law school. And there's a really great episode of Radiolab about it on More Perfect. Like the Korematsu case is like fairly well known, partially because they bring it up at every single Supreme Court justice confirmation.
Yeah.
With the exception of Brett Kavanaugh. Because prior, literally like months prior, and this is the part where I'm going to get emotional, is they overturned it. And they said, yes, the Supreme Court was wrong. Like, because the thing was like, the Korematsu case was, the U.S. government was totally within their rights because it was a time of war and we can do whatever we want in the time of war, which is basically what the Patriot Act does as well. That's like a very oversimplification of that. So then they overturned it, but they did it in such a way that would support the travel ban. And that was what made me sick, was like, how dare you take one group and take this like Japanese case and overturn it to discriminate against another group? Like, that's such bullshit.
Yeah.
So but those were like the very small rebellions and like the very small things. I think, for the most part, like people didn't really do anything. There was a lot of propaganda against the Japanese. Like Dr. Seuss has this horrifying image that,
I've seen that.
Yes,
before.
it's not like famous, but it's like put out a lot when you talk about propaganda. And like there was a ton of propaganda about the Japanese, and like it was really horrifying. But one of the big things that did happen is the day after Pearl Harbor, Eleanor Roosevelt went to a school in Tacoma, Washington that was mostly Japanese. And she made it a point to get her picture taken with Japanese-American high school students to humanize them, to normalize them again. It did not work. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. I didn't know that about Eleanor Roosevelt.
She's legit as shit.
Wow. Oh, that's a lot.
Yes. And that's like barely the iceberg of like what the hell internment was and what happened. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And it's just like, it's, again, back to intergenerational trauma. I feel like even though I don't think there's any Japanese people in my family, But, you know,
dude,
you just
with that
feel
colonialism though, like people have so much shit mixed up. Like, again, I'm very sure we talked about this off the air, but like, I'm very sure that my Japanese side is like Japanese, like we've traced it all back and like Okinawan. But I have friends who were like, who they're like, oh, I'm Vietnamese, but I found out I'm a quarter Chinese, or like there's so much mixing in the area just because people moved a lot, people conquered a lot. Yeah. My fucking friend's stepsister, adopted sister, she's Korean. And she's like, she did a 23andMe because her whole family did it, even though she was like, I'm pretty sure I'm just Korean. Yeah. She's a quarter Japanese. And right? Which sounds really cool. But then when you think about it, I was like, holy shit, there's a Comfort Wife situation here. Yes.
Comfort Women, the worst musical I've seen.
Oh my God, I can't believe you saw that.
Oh man, I feel so bad, but I'm just like, dude, it was
that should not be a musical,
good.
frankly. Comfort Women, Zoot Suiters in Japan, in Japanese internment camps, should be a musical. It'd be really sweet, like, and it would be like great and like show a range of Japanese and like and Asians in America. Comfort Women is a very sensitive issue that should not be a musical.
Yeah, it like hurt to watch. I was just like, oh no, this is bad.
Yeah, no.
Oh no. Yeah, but like when you were talking about like how they just recently overturned this case, but to support the travel ban. Yeah. It's just like I can feel it in my bones.
It made me physically ill. It still makes me physically ill.
Like I can feel, as you're talking about, I'm getting nauseous. And it's just like, it is like, I think it is like a trauma reaction.
Absolutely.
And I don't know how to explain this to most white Americans. I'm just like, it's just like it physically
I don't
hurts.
either.
And like when a lot of like now the conversation is just like, I feel like I can't say anything because I'm white. And it's just like, it's not even about that. It's not about your feeling. It's like, it's not
about you. That's the thing. I say that all the time to people where I'm like, sometimes I get mad about things and my boyfriend's like, it's not about you. And I'm like, you are learning because you're right. It's not about me.
It's not about you.
But sometimes it is about me. And like that Korematsu case, I was like, and no, it's not about me specifically, but it is about something that my people here went through. And like, I'm getting emotional now and I like start crying about it. And I know that's part of my trauma thing too. Cause my whole life, when I get like really close to these topics, I just like start tearing up and crying.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's okay to feel that. I'm getting nauseous as I'm talking about it. And that's also
I think I was like in the office when I found out about it and I had to like step out. Like,
cause it feels, I don't even know how to describe it because the way white Americans talk about it, it's just like an annoying thing that happens, like an inconvenience, like global warming. That's like inconvenient, I don't know. And it's like very intellectualized. So there's like a removal.
Yes.
If that makes sense.
Yes. I talk about that a lot with people actually, where I'm like, you're talking about this theoretically. It doesn't relate to you. Like you can go into these hypothetical situations that make me ill because it doesn't affect you.
Yes. And always playing like devil's advocate. And it's just like,
which is just another way of being an asshole.
Exactly. And thinking things are like reverse racism, which I'm like,
is
I'm
not
punch
existent.
The next person who says that to me.
Right.
I'm just
and by the way, for anyone listening to this who's like, reverse racism, like, how do I fight that? If anyone says to you reverse racism, in order to expect reverse racism, you have to accept that racism is a construct meant to build up, to uphold white supremacy. Yes. So you can't have reverse racism because the whole point of racism is to uphold white supremacy. And anything that like cracks it down is not actually reverse racism. Again, racism is specifically around white supremacy.
Exactly. But people won't even Google that.
I know.
And I don't think they have this like visceral gut reaction that we're having right now as we're talking about it, where I'm just like, oh my God, I could throw up, at any second.
I will say though, especially like because I'm half white, my white side we don't talk about these things either. They're Southern wasps. So we don't talk about these types of topics. But I've been very fortunate to have a lot of white friends in my life who are like, that's not what my America stands for. That's not what my they acknowledge their privilege, and like they also have this same visceral reaction not because of trauma, but they're just like, how dare the place that I'm from do this to other people?
Yeah.
And I really always appreciate that and love that. And like there are people who are performative, but there are also people who like, I see them do that and I'm like, I feel you. Like
it's just,
I'm so grateful to have people like that in my life because
for sure. Yes, I definitely have white friends who do that too. I'm not like, they're all the worst.
I do in a lot of my podcasts, which is why now I have to make it a point to be like, I know, like, because I have a lot of my white friends listen to like Asian American content and they're so excited about it and like, or like internment, they like want to know more about it. And like when I did Hotel, the play about internment, the people leading it was like a white female director, 2 white female producers, and they were like, we want to tell a story. We don't care how we do it. Like, we care a lot about how we do it. So we're going to be very purposeful. And like the thing that they did that made me the most happy, and the thing that I now, many years later, that I always tell content creators who are like, I want to support marginalized voices, but I'm like a white male or a white female, or like I'm from this majority group. I'm like, great. Cast diversely, but also like put diverse people in your group. So like in like the background, like, so like important. Get writers who are diverse, we had the set design was by this man, Carrie Wong, and it was the most beautiful set design. And like we had like our dramaturg was a lovely white male who was also like, all of you, please bring me your stories because like I don't know things, and like whatever you can to bring, like those are the types of things where you don't just like put Asian faces on the cover, like of whatever it is, you like put them into the whole system. And that's how you systematically break down racism. So
love it. Standing ovation.
Yes. Like that's the type of thing. Nina Roseberg did that for Crazy Rich Asians basically. And like that's the type of thing that I look for when I'm like, I definitely think that like white allies are important and exist. I mean, white women are the ones who like put together this piece that I do for schools, and it's like amazing and I love it. And one of the things they did was bring in a Japanese-American writer to help write the piece that I do.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah. So like if any of these white people want to help produce this movie that Sandie's going to write, that I'm going to help produce.
This movie, I'm going to do so much more research. It's back to my high school days of doing the history project all over again.
Yes.
We did go on to nationals. It was like the theme of that history, like it's a history competition.
I would have loved to have done that. I'm such a nerd.
I feel like it was a nationwide thing. I don't know.
I'm from Oklahoma. We didn't do, we had a water contest in 5th grade. That was like
water contest.
I don't even quite remember. My mom and I just recently found my trophy, and I met up with a friend who I hadn't spoken to in years about it, and both of us were like, what the hell did we do? When I was in 5th grade, there was like an H2O competition, and you had to learn all these facts about water, and you would compete and do trivia, and we won at the state level.
That's amazing.
Yeah, we studied our asses off. There are still things that I'm like, Ogallala Aquifer, and like a levee is this. And I'm like, we found out once we got to nationals, we were like, we didn't have to study this hard because no one else cared about this as much as we did. But for some reason, we like worked our asses off.
But that would be good for when a Mad Max situation comes when 12 years, I think that's the...
Oh my God, that also makes me... Yeah, that climate change thing also makes me physically ill.
So yeah, if you have all these water facts, I don't know anything about water. I'm just like... I boil it and I think it'll be okay to drink. I'm not sure.
Knowing what an aquifer is not going to be helpful when there is not an aquifer.
What was I? Oh yeah, the history competition. Yeah, I remember the theme was triumph and tragedy, and how we framed it was, in the end, Japanese-Americans still triumphed.
Actually such a problematic way of like...
Yeah, but it was like, that was the theme, and you had to find like a topic that like was in line with that theme. And I'm pretty sure because we built a website, everyone was like, what? Yeah, do this.
But that also sounds amazing for someone to like build a camera.
Yeah. I wish I remembered that guy's name. It's just, I remember going into his like studio space and interviewing him and like being really nervous about it because I'm like, talking to an adult, it's scary. And him being very somber about it. Yeah, I'm going to look it up and like maybe put it in the show notes and be like,
please do, because I want to see it.
Yeah. He was a wonderful. It's so cool that he was just like, I knew it was important to document it. I remember him saying that, and like he snuck in all the camera building equipment, and yeah.
And it's important for someone like who's living there and who's of Japanese descent to go, because there's some really famous pictures done by Dorothea Lange, and she was sent out by the government to take pictures to be like, they're thriving. And when she got there, she was like, oh no, this is bad.
Yeah.
And so her pictures are beautiful, and they show like how terrible camps were. I mean, like, I'm not equating. I actually did my piece once right after a Holocaust survivor. And I was like, it was like a day of, at this school in New Jersey, and it was a day of talking about genocide. And so I had to talk after 2 genocide survivors, and I was like, okay, so clearly my story is not the same. That was like the first thing I did, where I was like, I do not want to say that internment is the same as the Holocaust. It is not. Clearly they're vastly different. And like, yeah, the Holocaust is significantly worse. However, this happened in America and we don't talk about it. And these are like the leading up parallels almost exactly, like living in certain areas and like having signs that say like, this is Japanese, and like you are the curfew and all of those, and then eventually shipping them off. Like we were in America, like just like 2 or 3 steps away from the Holocaust. So those paralleled. And one of the big things that I talk about was like, it's not as bad, but it was still bad. Like there was no medical care, so people just died.
Yeah.
There was no, what else wasn't there? They would be sent food with bugs in it because they were sent like old army food. The barracks were built as temporary barracks. They weren't supposed to last more than like, I think 6 months, and they stayed for 3 years. Like, initially people were crowded into horse stalls, and the horses, there would still be horse shit in it. And like a family of 6 would have to live in there for months.
Oh my God. Yeah.
Yeah. There's this place in Seattle called Puyallup, and they have a fair every year called the Puyallup Fair. It's huge. And I never went the 4 years I was in Seattle, because the Puyallup Fairgrounds were the first stop, the first quote unquote relocation for the Japanese. And I was like, I don't even want to step ground there. I don't want to do it.
Yeah. It's like, it's just like one of those things where I sometimes feel like upstate New York is haunted because of like all the wars fought there, but also all the indigenous folks who've been like mass murdered.
Oh, I'm from Oklahoma, and like the ghost stories we tell were all like,
Osage, right?
Yeah. I grew up in Osage, and so there was, when they were talking about the Osage murders, like I knew nothing about that.
Yeah.
Nothing. They never taught us anything about that. To be fair, I did fall asleep in my Oklahoma history class constantly. So like my own fault for not learning about it. Maybe, but I'm very sure they also never taught us. I grew up like 20 minutes away from where August Osage County takes place.
That's crazy.
Yes. But the big like urban legend, like in My Favorite Murder, where they're like, what's your hometown? I'm like, I mean, the thing was like, don't go to an Indian cemetery, they'll shoot you.
No wonder they'll shoot you, because like these crazy white people are trying to murder them all the time.
To be fair, if you also, this happened to me once when I was in high school, where my friend and I like pulled over to the side of the road to do something, and like someone came out of their, like drove out on their farm and was like, who are you? And then we were like, we're just like trying to like go, I forget what we were doing, but he was like, okay, well, good, because I'm glad you said something, because I almost shot you.
Oh my God.
Oklahoma, there's a lot of guns. Anyway.
Yeah, I get really like freaked out by just anywhere that's not like a city. I don't know. It's like a thing. I can't handle it.
I get really anxious when I go to small towns now.
Yes, I can't do that.
I have really, just because it reminds me of where I grew up, and I get really anxious. I hate it.
I couldn't even imagine. I mean, yeah, but when we were talking about the healer, for example, I'm like, I swear I can feel, now this is me being crazy, but I feel like I can feel this like weird energy or something in like upstate New York where it's haunted. I swear it's haunted.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah. Ugh. Yeah. What do you wish that, like, do you think, I usually ask this to my guests, like, do you think there's anything, knowing all this now, moving forward, what could we do to enact some sort of change, or any suggestions you could give to people to move forward?
Yeah. The big thing that I always tell kids is to vote. Like, especially when I go to high schools, the first thing when they're like, you guys probably don't know what to do. Here's what you can do. Show up to marches and rallies and vote. And then I'm always like, how many of you are turning 18 soon? How many of you are already 18 and are planning to vote? You need to fucking vote. Like,
Yes.
I don't care what anyone says. God damn it, go vote. Be like active in public service. The other thing is, I mean, I truly am a believer that education is one of the most important things you can do. And so, like, for a lot, I mean, the thing is, like, a lot of internment is like coming back into the public mind now, because it's been, I mean, because World War II stories in general are coming out, because that generation is dying off, and you have to preserve those stories, and internment is a huge part of that. And we're also going through this time in America where we're like purging a really disgusting wound.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, like it's so divisive, and I feel like everything terrible that's happened that we never talked about in the US. We're such a young country. Like it's just all bubbling to the surface now. And so we have a chance to talk about these things. And if we don't talk about them, they're going to be used against us, like the Korematsu case, or even, I can't remember his name now, but there was a guy like right before Trump got inaugurated when they were talking about the travel ban. And he was like, well, I think that Japanese internment set a precedent in the US. And I was like, again, had like a very visceral, like I'm getting emotional talking about it, like reaction where I was like, never, ever, ever. I worked too hard for that.
Yeah.
Don't ever do that. Like, and I talk about that now at schools where I'm like, I cannot tell you how important it is for me to come here and say to you guys, like, we cannot do this again, blah, blah, blah. Like, this is the very human story, and this is what happens, and this is what happened in my family. And like, I'm a flesh and blood person in front of you. And like, I wanted you to be able to look me in the eye and say like, this can't happen again. And that's, and then I just realized my voice got so low. So like, hopefully all of that recorded.
No, it's okay.
So yeah, this like education and like teaching people, not just young people either, like older people, and like, because that's the baby boomer generation is the generation that was never taught this.
Yeah.
And now they're the ones in charge of the country in like the most ridiculous way. Some of them, John Bolton, really, like, anyway. So like telling as many stories as we can, educating as much as we can, like honest to God, having a Hotel on the Corner of Bitter and Sweet film come out, like that's part of my big thing about movies is like, it reaches a mass audience in a way that like a history class can't. So I'm saying like educate, but if you can have a film or a podcast or something that's going to reach millions of people and in a story connect with them in a way that a lecture might not, that's one of the most important things I think that can happen. So like,
I'm all behind that.
Yes.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And just, I know you're getting emotional, and I'm so grateful that you're having the courage to be vulnerable with me. And
I'm on
thank you so much.
recording of Risk also, and I like started crying. So
yeah, so thank you so much for sharing that vulnerability and that authenticity, because I think that's important to hear that, because a lot of people don't recognize how, I don't even know if hurtful is the word. It's just so painful to do this over and over again. And like, that's why I remember when we were folding cranes, I was just like, honestly, I can't even like, when things get whitewashed, I'm just like, I don't even react to it anymore, because like, I think if I keep reacting to it, I'll just like, I don't know, fall apart and have a breakdown. Because I'm just like, at what point do you learn?
Oh, I hit that point during some Academy Award nomination when Dev Patel was nominated for Lion for supporting actor, even though he was clearly the lead actor. And they were like, oh, he didn't have enough screen time in minutes. And I was livid, and I threw a fit, and I like cried and like yelled in front of my coworkers, and they were all like, we know, like they were all on my side. Yeah. But I like, I've definitely had those moments where I like am like letting out something.
Yeah. It's too much.
Yeah.
Ugh.
That being said, like Ghost in the Shell was terrible. No one should say it. It was really boring. So it's super satisfying when something is like also fucking bad. Iron Fist getting canceled? Yes, I live. Cancel.
So happy about that, because I know a lot of like Asian Americans are losing jobs and everything, and that sucks.
Actually, it's weird because like a lot of Asian Americans got hella cast on that show. Mm-hmm. So even though it was a white male lead, like most of the cast around him were Asian, which is one, gross, but two, also like, get your job.
Yeah, exactly. But that was when we first met up. I told you that was one of the first panels I had gone to, and one of the directors and one of the actors from Iron Fist were there, and they were talking up Iron Fist, and I was getting like really annoyed. But that's besides the point. But that was like when I asked a question of like, don't you want to amplify? Because they were talking about like color blindness, basically.
Colorblind casting is just another way to uphold white supremacy. We should be looking at color conscious casting.
Exactly. And they're just like, I don't want to talk about being Asian. I just want to be human. That
okay, well, yeah,
but I'm just
thanks
like,
for that. Who said that? Oh, who was the asshole who probably said that? Oh, not an asshole. I didn't mean to say.
It's okay. I'll cut this out.
Okay, then I'm not going to say what
I don't remember who said that.
No, but I get that a lot from Asian people who are like, I don't want to think about race. Like, it's not important. I'm like, okay, great. So you should look up what the triangulation of society is. And like, because I think you and I talked about this.
Yes, we talked about that.
Yeah, where Asians like live in between and can move up and down between white and black, like, tiers. But
yeah, do you find yourself like grapple with that being half white?
Oh God, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I'm super white passing as well. And so when I do talk about like Asian issues or like Asian history or things like that, people are like, but you're half white and you look more white. Or they're like, I didn't know you're Asian, da 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 da. And I'm like, okay, well, so that's erasure. And then they're like, and then when I am talking in white or in Asian spaces, then they'll sometimes be like, oh, but you're half white. And like, you're so lucky. And I'm like, okay, so that's also erasure.
Yes.
Yeah. There's a lot of like, I've had a lot of people try to like cover up my Asian side with my white side. So then I feel like I overcorrected and went more Asian. So now I'm in a space where I'm like celebrating both sides and like trying to, I mean, like my dad's side is Southern. I grew up in Oklahoma. There is like a very country rural thing to me. And so I'm like trying to figure out how that works back into a full identity instead of a binary identity.
Yeah, that makes sense because like even for me, like I'm fully Chinese. That's a whole other topic.
Yes. Yeah.
I'll just say Chinese. But because, you know, I was born and raised in America and there's like still parts like I was just telling one of my friends, he's also Asian American. I was just like, why am I like weirdly comforted when I hear like country music sometimes? Like, I'm just like, you know, sometimes if you walk into a store and there's like...
It makes me want to die, but yes.
country music and I'm just like...
Americana.
It's just so... It's so white, but I'm like, there's a part of me that's just like, oh, this is kind of nice.
But like Asian...
What is that?
That's the thing is like Asian cowboys were like a thing. Like Asian country music is like a thing. Like you can do... Yeah. I think there's... What I love about your podcast is there's like so many spaces that we assume are for white people or assume are for different ethnicities. And it's like, actually, we were here, like we were there. And like, it just like infiltrates so many assumptions about how we tell stories and how we view things.
And it sheds light to my own like colonialism, but what my own mindset of just like being basically whitewashed, so to speak, of like, because when I look at history, I do look at it from a purely white lens because that's what I was taught and that's what I grew up with.
Oh my God. And open it up to an intersectional lens and it's incredible and so great.
And this podcast has helped me really see that like, oh, I've also had like so many problematic thoughts before of like,
oh my God.
Yeah. So it's just like a great learning experience for everyone.
And it's also, I was listening to a different podcast about intersectional, intergenerational trauma. Mm-hmm. And one of the big things that they said that you should do to heal trauma is create new traditions. And so like, I feel like you're doing that with your podcast and like, you're welcome. Yeah. And that's the other thing, like going back to what you said, like what can people do? Like create things, create work, create art, create communities. Like for Hapa Mag, that's like a huge thing for us is to like give visibility and have like a new tradition and a new thing come out because that's how you heal trauma.
Yeah. And don't beg for space because you can create it yourself.
Oh my God. In the age of the internet, create your own space, which is a double-edged sword because that's how Reddit trolls happen. But
oh, yes.
it can also tying it back around.
Yeah, I personally, like, I just ended acting school and, like, there's just, like, this huge part of me. It's just like, oh, I just feel like it's begging when I audition. Because, like, I don't necessarily want to play something that some white person wrote. And it's just like...
But, like, Shakespeare wrote some of the best roles.
Yeah, it's a whole thing I'm grappling with still.
It's an ongoing process.
It's an ongoing process. But, yeah, I definitely like putting myself in the identity of a storyteller rather than just like, I'm only this one type of artist.
Right. Well, and nowadays, like, you have, especially in New York, like, you have to be so many different things in order to, like, survive. So,
yeah.
And everything comes down to storytelling anyway, I think. So
I agree. Yes, and everyone tell your stories. That's another thing. Just amplify your voice.
Yeah.
Unless you're a Reddit troll. Then
no. And then you can sit down and listen to everyone else tell their stories and then learn how empathy works.
Exactly.
And maybe tell your story to a therapist because that will be really healing for you.
Oh my God. So many people. This year, I've just been telling everyone to go to therapy. I'm just like, just
everyone
go to therapy.
Go to therapy.
Go to therapy.
I need to go to therapy.
Yeah, I need to go back.
I need to get on Maven.
Yes, go on Maven, everyone. I swear they're not paying me. But I love Maven. They're great. Yeah, they have a coupon code. It's Try Maven. You get
oh my God, yes.
$30 off or something. You get like your first appointment free.
Okay.
Which is great. Yeah. So
cool.
Check out Maven. Is there anything... Oh, yes. As we're wrapping up.
Yeah.
Is there anything you want to plug? Anything you're working on that's coming out that people should be aware of?
I don't know when this is coming out, but the last episode of my podcast will be out the second Tuesday of November, and then that'll be the end of season 3 for We're Not All Ninjas. So find that at Not All Ninjas Pod on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. And we'll be covering Bohemian Rhapsody because Freddie Mercury, also like Hidden History, is technically the first South Asian rock star, first Asian rock star international, because he was Persian and he grew up in India before moving to England.
I had no idea. I thought he was just some British dude.
Nope, he was Zoroastrian. He grew up, his real name is Farouk, not Freddie.
Wow.
Yep.
Wait, who's playing him?
Rami Malek, who is Egyptian.
Yeah. Is that okay?
I think so.
Yeah? Okay.
I think so, but I'm going to talk about it on my podcast, but there was a whole casting issue previous to Rami Malek playing it. So I think I'm like perfectly happy with Rami Malek, but I mean, I might not have a say because I'm half East Asian. Like, anyway, but I also love Freddie Mercury. And then we also have Hapa Mag coming out on December 5th, I think. It's the first Wednesday in December, and it'll be our 6th issue. So
ooh, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Yay.
It's our holiday issue. We'll have a party. It'll be really exciting.
I'm going to go.
Please do.
Yeah, and you guys can, of course, subscribe to this podcast. We're everywhere now. Find us on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, anywhere. Leave comments. Tell me what you think. And that's a wrap, I guess.
Oh, yeah. Sandie and I will also both be at Work It.
Oh, yes. If you're going to be at Work It, the Lady Podcasters conference, actually, 2-day conference at the Knockdown Center. We will be there. So come say hi. I'm always excited to meet other podcasters.
Same.
Yay! Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you for having me.
We'll also have a part 2 of Japanese internment camp.
Yes. I've got 2 other stories that need to be movies that I want to talk about.
So we'll
that I didn't even hint at here.
Oh, yeah. So keep it in a mystery. So yeah, I'll talk to you soon, Melissa.
Thanks, Sandie.
Yay! Bye.
Bye.